If you close this video right now, you will permanently lose the 5-minute morning protocol I developed after watching my own father collapse on a bathroom floor at 6:47 in the morning, doing something every cardiologist knows is dangerous and that no cardiologist ever tells their patients to stop. Being a protocol built on research explaining why cardiac events kill more people between 6 and 10 in the morning than at any other 4-hour window in the day. A window during which the risk of heart attack is 40 to 50% higher than baseline, and during which the habits that millions of adults over 60 perform every morning are interacting with a cardiovascular system that is not warmed up, not hydrated, and not ready for what is being asked of it. Japanese cardiology identified this mechanism in 1989. South Korean prevention guidelines addressed it in 2007. Western medicine is still waiting for people to ask the right question. Most people over 60 believe that if they have made it through the night, the morning is safe. They wake up, they get moving, they do the same things they have done for 40 years. What they do not know, and what most Western cardiologists do not explain in a routine appointment, is that the human cardiovascular system does not transition from sleep to wakefulness smoothly. It detonates. In the 60 minutes following the moment you open your eyes, your body initiates a sequence of hormonal, hemodynamic, and neurological changes that place extraordinary demand on the heart simultaneously. And for adults over 60 whose arteries carry years of accumulated plaque and whose cardiac electrical system is less forgiving of sudden disruption, that morning detonation is the most dangerous 60 minutes of every single day. This is not theoretical. It is the documented mechanism behind the majority of sudden cardiac deaths in adults over 60, and it is entirely preventable. My name is Dr. Jae Yoon. I am a physician trained in Western cardiovascular medicine and traditional East Asian integrative medicine, and I need to tell you something before we go any further. My father was 68 years old, physically active, with no prior cardiac history and normal cholesterol at his last checkup, and he collapsed on his bathroom floor at 6:47 in the morning, doing something he had done every day for 30 years. He survived. Most people who experience what he experienced do not. What I found in the research following that morning was not a rare or unpredictable event. It was a textbook consequence of 5 specific physiological insults occurring simultaneously in a cardiovascular system under maximum stress from the normal biology of waking up. Insults that he delivered to his own heart in the name of discipline, and that millions of adults over 60 deliver to their hearts every single morning without knowing what they are doing. I want to stop for just a moment because I need to ask you something directly. I do not have a pharmaceutical company funding this channel. I have no product to sell and no financial interest in what I am about to share with you. What I have is 26 years of clinical cardiology research, a father who almost did not make it to 69, and you. Right now, before we go any further, do 3 things that cost you absolutely nothing. First, press like right now. Without that like, YouTube buries this video, and the person who needs it most never finds it. With your like, this reaches 100,000 people, and somewhere in that number is someone whose spouse, whose parent, whose friend gets up every morning and does exactly what I am about to describe. Your like is the reason they find this today or never do. Second, subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Every week, I release research your cardiologist was never taught to discuss in a standard appointment, and your subscription is what keeps this channel alive. Third, leave a comment right now telling me what country you are watching from and whether you recognize any of the 5 habits I am about to describe in yourself or someone you love. I read every single one. Now let us talk about what is actually happening to your heart in the first 60 minutes of every morning. When you open your eyes, your body does not ease into wakefulness. It launches into what cardiovascular researchers call the morning surge, a coordinated physiological assault on a system that has been in near shutdown for 8 hours. The first shock is hormonal. Cortisol and adrenaline levels rise by up to 60% within minutes of waking, forcing the heart to accelerate, forcing blood vessels to contract, and raising blood pressure sharply before the cardiovascular system has had any opportunity to prepare for the demand. The second shock is hemodynamic. After 8 hours without water, your blood has thickened through hemoconcentration, increasing its viscosity to a state that cardiologists compare to the difference between water and honey moving through the same pipe. This thickened blood is significantly more likely to form clots, requires the heart to generate substantially more force to circulate, and moves through already narrowed arteries with measurably less efficiency. The third shock is neurological. The parasympathetic nervous system that governed your body through sleep hands control abruptly to the sympathetic fight-or-flight system, a transfer that in young, healthy cardiovascular systems happens smoothly, and in aging or compromised ones happens with destabilizing force. These three shocks do not occur sequentially, they occur simultaneously, within the first 4 to 6 minutes of waking, before most adults have sat up in bed or reached for their phone. For a cardiovascular system that is young and uncompromised, this simultaneous triple assault is manageable. For a cardiovascular system over 60, with arterial walls that are less elastic, coronary arteries that are partially narrowed, and a cardiac electrical system that is less tolerant of sudden rate changes, these three converging shocks represent the physiological foundation of the most dangerous 60 minutes of every single day. Now I want to tell you about the 5 specific behaviors that transform this morning physiological storm into a potentially fatal cardiac event. I call them the 5 triggers because each one is a loaded trigger being pulled against a cardiovascular system already at maximum stress. The reason they matter, particularly for adults over 60, is specific and measurable. After 60, the arterial walls are less elastic and less able to absorb sudden pressure changes. After 60, the cardiac electrical system is less tolerant of abrupt rate changes. After 60, atherosclerotic plaque that has accumulated silently in the coronary arteries is more vulnerable to rupture under sudden mechanical stress. The behaviors I am about to describe are not dangerous for a 25-year-old. For a cardiovascular system over 65 or 70, they are the precise combination of insults that the morning cardiac event literature identifies as the triggering mechanism behind the majority of preventable sudden cardiac deaths in this age group. Trigger 1 is rising abruptly from bed. When you go from horizontal to vertical suddenly, gravity pulls blood volume away from the brain and upper body toward the legs at a rate that the baroreceptors in your arterial walls, which are responsible for detecting and correcting sudden pressure changes, cannot compensate for quickly enough in an aging cardiovascular system. The result is orthostatic hypotension, a sudden drop in blood pressure that the heart attempts to correct by accelerating violently. In a healthy heart with young, elastic vessels, this correction produces a brief, dizzy sensation and nothing more. In a heart already contending with the morning hormonal surge, thickened blood, and heightened sympathetic tone, this violent acceleration becomes a measurable arrhythmia trigger. This is why the statistics on morning cardiac events cluster so heavily in the first 30 minutes after waking, and why the speed of your postural transition is a cardiovascular variable you can control at no cost. Research published in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology found that orthostatic hypotension in adults over 65 is associated with a 54% higher risk of major cardiac events occurring within the hour following the postural change, with the risk concentrated specifically in the morning waking period. This is not a theoretical association derived from small samples. It is a finding replicated across multiple cohort studies involving thousands of participants, and it identifies the single most preventable morning trigger as the one that every adult performs without thinking. The transition from lying down to standing, accomplished too quickly in a cardiovascular system that has not been given time to prepare for the gravitational demand being placed on it. Slowing this transition by 30 seconds costs nothing. For adults over 65, the research suggests it may be one of the most protective cardiovascular decisions made all day. Trigger 2 is failing to drink water immediately upon waking. Your blood at the moment of waking, after 8 hours without fluid intake, has a measurably higher hematocrit, meaning a higher concentration of red blood cells relative to plasma volume. This increased viscosity raises workload on the heart directly, increases likelihood of platelet aggregation in already narrowed coronary arteries, and reduces the efficiency of oxygen delivery to the cardiac muscle at the exact moment it is being asked to dramatically increase output. The 40 to 50% elevation in heart attack risk documented in the morning hours is not attributable solely to the hormonal surge. A significant portion is attributable to blood viscosity from overnight dehydration, a variable that is correctable in 5 minutes with 400 milliliters of water, and that most adults over 60 are not correcting because nobody has ever explained to them why it matters biologically. Trigger 3 is strong coffee on an empty stomach, and the sequence matters as much as the coffee itself. Caffeine consumed with food is absorbed gradually, with cardiovascular effects peaking at a rate the circulatory system can accommodate. Caffeine consumed on a completely empty stomach within the first 20 to 30 minutes of waking is absorbed at a rate that produces a secondary adrenaline surge on top of the cortisol and adrenaline already flooding the cardiovascular system from the morning hormonal peak. In adults with normal cardiovascular function, this produces palpitations and mild blood pressure elevation. In adults over 60 with any degree of coronary artery narrowing or cardiac electrical irregularity, this compounded adrenergic stimulus can produce dangerous rate and rhythm changes. Research from the Karolinska Institute found 35% higher incidence of morning cardiac arrhythmias in adults over 60 consuming high caffeine in the fasting state versus after a meal. Trigger 4 is intense exercise immediately after waking, and this trigger causes the most resistance because the popular understanding of exercise as uniformly beneficial ignores the timing context that determines whether it protects or harms the cardiovascular system. Vigorous exercise in the morning, before the cardiovascular system has completed its transition from sleep physiology, asks the heart to perform at high output while coronary arteries are still at their most constricted from overnight temperature drop, while blood is still at its most viscous from overnight dehydration, and while blood pressure is already elevated from the morning cortisol peak. Research from Harvard Medical School found vigorous morning exercise before 7 in the morning associated with 3 times the rate of acute coronary events, compared to the same exercise performed after 10 in the morning in adults with pre-existing undiagnosed coronary artery disease, a population representing an estimated 40% of adults over 65. Trigger 5 is the one that almost killed my father. A cold shower immediately after waking produces what cardiovascular physiologists call a cold shock response, a massive instantaneous vasoconstriction driven by the autonomic nervous system's response to sudden thermal stress. In 4 to 6 seconds, peripheral blood vessels constrict dramatically, forcing blood pressure to spike by as much as 30 to 40 millimeters of mercury above the already elevated morning baseline. For arteries carrying atherosclerotic plaque, this sudden mechanical pressure surge can shear plaque from the arterial wall, triggering the clotting cascade that produces a heart attack. For a heart already dealing with the morning hormonal storm and thickened blood, the cold shower represents a convergence of every cardiovascular risk factor simultaneously. My father stepped into a cold shower at 6:45 in the morning, felt what he described as a fist closing around his chest, and was on the floor before he could reach the tap. The 5-minute morning protection protocol I developed following my father's event is not complicated. It requires no medication, no equipment, and no expense beyond 5 minutes that most adults spend scrolling their phone in bed. Minute 1. Do not get up. Stay lying down, breathe slowly and deliberately for 60 seconds. Deep diaphragmatic breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which partially counteracts the cortisol and adrenaline surge and allows the cardiovascular system to begin its transition at a controlled rate rather than a sudden one. This single minute of deliberate breathing has been shown in research from Kyoto University to reduce morning systolic blood pressure peak by an average of 8 millimeters of mercury in adults over 60. A reduction comparable to the effect of a low-dose antihypertensive medication without any of the side effects or cost. Minute 2. Drink water before standing. Keep 400 milliliters of water on your bedside table every night. Drink it while still sitting on the edge of the bed before standing. This begins the process of reducing blood viscosity within 10 to 15 minutes before you make the postural change to standing that triggers the orthostatic blood pressure response. The sequence matters. Hydrating after standing provides less protection because the orthostatic stress has already occurred. Hydrating before standing allows even a partial reduction in hematocrit to reduce the cardiac workload at the moment it is most vulnerable to sudden demand. Minute 3. Sit on the edge of the bed and rotate your ankles in both directions for 30 seconds each. Ankle rotation activates the soleus muscle pump in the calves, which drives venous blood from the lower extremities back toward the heart, reducing the blood pooling that contributes to orthostatic hypotension when you stand. Minute 4 is standing stretches and gentle upper body movement for 60 seconds. This is not exercise. This is the vascular equivalent of warming a car engine before driving in winter. The mild muscular activity increases blood flow to peripheral vasculature, raises skin temperature, and reduces the arterial stiffness from overnight cooling before you place any significant hemodynamic demand on the system. Minute 5. Stand slowly, hold the bedside table or wall for balance during the first 10 seconds, and walk at a relaxed pace for 60 seconds before doing anything else. Do not rush to the bathroom. Do not reach immediately for your phone. The 5 minutes between opening your eyes and beginning your day are not inconvenient. They are the 5 minutes that, for adults over 60 with any cardiovascular risk factor, represent the difference between a normal morning and one that ends in an ambulance. My father does this protocol every morning now. He is 73. The research supporting this protocol extends across multiple institutions and cardiovascular subspecialties. A landmark study published in Circulation, the flagship journal of the American Heart Association, analyzing morning cardiac event timing across 4,200 documented cases, found that 42% of all sudden cardiac deaths in adults over 60 occurred between 6 and 10 in the morning, with the peak between 6:30 and 8, precisely the window in which the hormonal surge, blood viscosity, and autonomic transition are simultaneously at their most dangerous. Research from the University of Tokyo found that the hemodynamic response to standing was significantly more destabilizing in morning hours, with measurably higher rates of dangerous blood pressure variability in adults over 65. Japanese cardiovascular prevention guidelines incorporating morning transition protocols since 2003 document a 23% lower rate of morning cardiac events in adherent populations. I want to address directly the patients who will hear this and feel it does not apply to them because they feel fine, because they have done these things for decades without incident, because their last checkup was normal. The clinical literature on sudden cardiac death in adults over 60 contains a finding I consider the most underemphasized in all of cardiovascular medicine. The majority of people who experience a fatal morning cardiac event had no prior diagnosis and had passed a routine cardiovascular screening within the preceding 12 months. The atherosclerotic plaque that ruptures under morning hemodynamic stress does not announce itself. The electrical instability producing fatal ventricular fibrillation under cold shock does not appear on a resting ECG. The absence of a diagnosis is not the absence of risk, and for adults over 60, the absence of a morning event so far is not evidence that the routine is safe. It is evidence that the threshold has not yet been crossed. Now let me give you the economic calculation behind why this 5-minute protocol is not discussed in the standard 15-minute cardiology appointment. The acute care cost of a survived heart attack in the United States averages $87,000 in hospital charges alone, not including rehabilitation, ongoing medication, and the functional limitations that affect quality of life for an average of 5 years following the event. The lifetime cost of managing heart failure following a cardiac event averages $109,000. A fatal cardiac event costs the surviving family an average of $420,000 in total household financial impact. The 5-minute morning protocol costs nothing. It requires no prescription, no equipment, no clinic visit. The reason it is not standard advice in Western cardiology is the same reason most effective prevention is not. The economic architecture of the system is built around treating events, not preventing the morning habits that cause them. If you made it this far, I need you to do one thing before you close this video and go to sleep tonight. Put a glass of 400 milliliters of water on your bedside table right now, because tomorrow morning when the cortisol hits and the blood is thick and the heart is working harder than it should, that glass is the first thing you are going to reach for. And now, 3 things from the heart. First, if you have not pressed like yet, do it right now. Without your like, this video reaches 100 people. With your like, it reaches 100,000, and somewhere in that number is someone who wakes up tomorrow and pulls all 5 triggers before 7 in the morning because nobody has ever told them what those habits are doing to their heart. Your like is the reason they find this today. Second, subscribe and activate the bell. I have 38 more videos covering cardiovascular research the pharmaceutical industry has no financial interest in promoting, publishing every single week. Third, share this with one person over 60 who takes a cold shower every morning or jumps out of bed the moment the alarm goes off. Leave a comment telling me your country and which of the 5 triggers you recognized in your own morning routine. Your action is not a number on a screen. It may be the most important thing someone receives today. I will see you in the next video, where I reveal the specific herb used in Japanese cardiovascular clinics since 1994, shown in 7 peer-reviewed trials to reduce morning blood pressure surge by an average of 11 millimeters of mercury, available at any Asian market for less than $4, never incorporated into a single Western cardiology guideline. Dr. Jae Yoon, the science Asia has always known. Take care of yourself tonight, I mean that.